In this video, we meet Shakira, a woman who uses a single crutch. She's interviewed seated in a gallery space, wearing a red beret perched atop thick salt and pepper hair, a sheer red scarf, and a red and blue jacket. In the background, an ornate timber pagoda stretches up out of sight. Shakira is shown writing in an office, on a panel at the Melbourne Writers' Festival, and with her daughter, Adalia. Text, Act 1, When Life Doesn't Follow Your Plan.
My name is Shakira Hussein. I'm affiliated with the Asia Institute at the University of Melbourne. After I finished my PhD at the Australian National University in 2010, I did a postdoctoral fellowship on Muslim women, gender violence and racism. I started the PhD because the idea of fieldwork deeply appealed to me. I wanted to undertake fieldwork in Pakistan, which I did do. I basically wanted to roam the world and travel and write. I wanted to have a much more exciting life than the life of an academic.
Old photos of Shakira on her travels.
I wanted to meet interesting people. I wanted to write about them. I wanted to help people to understand each other better through telling stories. It took a very long time to get a diagnosis with the multiple sclerosis. In fact, I was misdiagnosed along the way. There was some pressure, I felt, to cut back, to be sensible, to focus on my health and not to push myself so hard, and certainly to reconcile myself with living a quieter life. The girl that I was in primary school or high school, possibly even university, was so intent on being a writer that if someone had said to her, you could have an ordinary life in the suburbs where you work in the public service, you've got a husband, 3 kids, you're healthy, you basically have an ordinary life. Or you could be a writer.
Screenshots of articles by Shakira in Crikey and the Interpreter. Then, footage of Shakira on a panel for the Melbourne Writers' Festival.
You could be published, you could get to meet other writers, even be friends with other writers, but you'll have this painful, disabling disease. I think I would have thought that the painful, disabling disease was a small price to pay for being a published writer and getting to meet all these other writers who I really admire.
She leans forward, chuckling. Text, Act 2, Writing About Identity.
I remember a very particular moment when it dawned on me that the books that I read had all started out as ideas in somebody's head, and that the stories that I made up in my head could be put down in the same way and maybe eventually become books. And it felt like such a huge, momentous discovery that I felt like I actually needed to ask permission to do that. So I went to my teacher and said, could I please just write a story? It was that revelation that the thoughts that I had in my head didn't have to stay in my head, that my imagination could be transferred onto paper and shared with other people and potentially even published in a book with covers.
A headline from Inside Story reads, Victims and Suspects, the catch-22 of being a Muslim woman in Australia. Then, from ubiquitous to obsolete. Then, social life of Muslim women's rights.
Most of the material that I write is not about disability because it's mostly about the other Muslim women who I've interviewed and the political situation that they find themselves in. So the Australian edition of my book was published in 2016. It's called From Victims to Suspects, Muslim Women Since 9/11. The book discusses the experience of Muslim women around the globe in the years since September 11, 2001. I find intersectional feminism very useful for understanding my experience of being both disabled and brown-skinned and Muslim during a phase of history where that's considered a very problematic identity. And that helps me not to feel too alone. Another factor with the multiple sclerosis diagnosis was I thought, this is the first bad thing that's ever happened to me that I have absolutely no desire to write about. But as time went on, of course, I did feel impelled to write about it, and I did find that writing about it was helpful and useful and that it helped me to connect with other people with disability.
A book cover reads, #MeToo, and the uneven distribution of trauma.
For example, the essay that I contributed to that Me Too book was very specifically about the experience of Me Too while being both disabled and belonging to a marginalised racial identity. I had thought that as I got older, I would be less vulnerable to harassment, but I think that having a visible vulnerability, it's actually been the opposite.
Text, Act 3, A Proud Mum.
I'm also a mother of, obviously, amazing daughter, and I've been a sole parent for most of her life. And so during these various trials and tribulations, it was basically the two of us against the world. And I was obviously worried about the impact that was going to have on her future. She was obviously upset, as you would be when I was sick. And she took on this role of carer at a very young age.
In an old photograph, Shakira watches over her young daughter cooking on the stove.
She was the Sydney Morning Herald Home Cook Hero of the Week at age 7, with the touching story of the little girl who taught herself to cook after her mother's multiple sclerosis diagnosis because she got bored with eating breakfast cereal for dinner, which was about all that I was able to manage. I really couldn't do much at all except lie on the sofa and listen to her saying, "Which one is a tablespoon? It's bubbling over everywhere. What do I do? The tea towel's on fire." But she learned, she cooked, she enjoyed it, and we got through. So she's now studying creative writing and publishing at the University of Melbourne, and I'm enormously proud of her achievements.
A headline reads, "Meet the 2018 Scribe Non-Fiction Shortlist, Adalia Nash Hussein."
Not just proud of her educational and her writing achievements, but just proud of her in being able to keep her shit together and being able to keep both our shit together during some very hard times. I wouldn't recommend getting a neurological disease as a parenting technique. It's a little bit high risk, but, it seems to have worked out for us. It obviously affects the power dynamics in your relationship because she would have to take charge, but I'm still the parent. And I had to show respect for the fact that she was taking on responsibilities that were above her age and that I couldn't treat her as a little kid.
In Shakira's lounge room, her daughter applies eyeshadow for her mum.
My daughter's 22 now and we're still very close and we talk about life, the universe and everything, and I'm sure you can hear I'm enormously proud of her.
Text. Do your thing. Text. Women with Disabilities Victoria. Empowering women.